In this session, I'd like to speak to you about a mathematical principle which could be used as an effective tool to help manage yourself more effectively and more successfully. Selling has a lot to do with management. Managing your time effectively, managing your prospects effectively, managing your customers effectively, the resources you have, the products and services you offer, and so on. And this mathematical principle is called the Pareto Principle, and it's also known as the 80-20 rule. So what I'd like to do today is explain this principle, and as I do that, I'll demonstrate how you could benefit from understanding this vital 80-20 rule. Well, in 1906, there was an Italian economist, and his name was Vilfredo Pareto. And he created this mathematical formula to describe the unequal distribution of wealth in his country. That's how it began. He noticed that 20% of the people living in Italy owned 80% of the wealth. And so this Pareto principle states that 80% of the results stem from 20% of the causes. And if you think about it, 80% of your sales come from 20% of your products. 80% of your sales come from 20% of your clients. 80% of your profit is generated by 20% of the salespeople within the company. 80% of your output comes from 20% of your time. So I think you can see how this Pareto principle can be applied to almost anything. And it can certainly be used the other way around. 20% of the salespeople that work within your company generate 80% of your sales. 20% of your time generates 80% of your output. Now, this Pareto principle should remind you to focus on the 20% that makes the real difference. As I said, 20% makes the real difference. 20% of your time, 20% of your products, 20% of your clients, and so on. So this principle should remind you to focus on the 20% that make the real difference. Focus on the 20% that really matters. Salespeople must identify, and then they should focus on the 20% that is really producing the results. If you're running late, or there's just enough time to do there isn't enough time to do everything in a given day, make sure that you focus on the 20% that really matters. That 20% mustn't be left undone. Don't leave the 20% undone, because that is what's generating the bulk of your output or the bulk of your sales. So what you need to do is you need to take a close look at the products and the services you're offering. And you need to ask yourself, which 20% is generating 80% of the profit? Which 20% of my clients are generating 80% of my sales? Which 20% of the sales force is generating 80% of the sales? And when you identify the 20%, focus your time and focus your attention on those products, on those services, on that time. So that's the point of the Pareto principle. Focus on the 20% that is generating the most. So again, just ask yourself, which 20% of your customers are generating 80% of your income? And again, when you identify them, be sure to focus your time and your attention on those 20%. Obviously, you cannot leave the rest undone, but be sure to know which 20% is generating 80% of your output, and focus on that 20%, because you'll only generate more. And again, this will help you to prioritize your time. It'll help you to manage your time more effectively. So the point of the Pareto principle is to remind yourself to daily focus your time, to daily focus your energy on that 20% that matters. The 20% is what is bringing you the majority of your results. So cherish that 20%, focus on it, so that you can better manage your resources, so that you can better manage your prospects, your customers, your time, and ultimately increase your productivity and your profits. That's what it's all about.